evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Those are the three we're going to talk about tonight.
Ever merge with them.
So,
Make a motion to they don't want to
You
bring
can,
score.
yep, you can move to approve them if everyone's had a chance to, hopefully everyone's had a chance to read them. Okay, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. It is 5:37. We're here this evening for a couple of reasons, a few reasons. It's a rather short agenda. We're here to talk about of course, do our minutes, and then we have a reserve fund transfer, and then we are here to discuss a debt exclusion for the new school. Before we launch into that discussion about the debt exclusion, I'd like to kind of get over our housekeeping work first, so that we can focus on this debt exclusion question. I will be taking comments from the people that are here. We have 2 select board members and 2 people from the school system that are going to hopefully be able to speak to us for a few minutes about what's going on at this time, and give us a little guidance as to how the bonding in that may go. So hopefully we'll learn a little bit from the school when it comes down to that. So that being said, let's talk about our minutes first.
Excuse me, the first one I have is February 27th. We're in 3 or 4?
Pardon?
For, meeting minutes that we're supposed to act on.
We're
tonight.
not gonna do 4, we're gonna do 3,
Oh, just
we're
3.
moving
There
on.
was
I thought
a
there
bit of
were
an
4.
issue
There's
with
gonna be-
minutes for that.
You're
For the
excluding
20th,
March
there was a-
20th.
Oh, okay, thank you. I thought there were 4 originally. All right, so I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the Finance Committee meeting of Wednesday, February 27th, 2019.
Second.
Motion's been made to approve the minutes for February, what's it?
27th.
February 27th. Has everyone had an opportunity to read the minutes? Has everyone, no changes or anything? Okay, all those in favor of approval of the minutes?
Aye.
In favor, all those opposed? Unanimous, thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the Finance Committee meeting of Wednesday, March 5th, 2019.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the minutes of March 5th. Has everyone had an opportunity to read them,
Yes.
discuss them? Were there any questions or concerns? Seeing or hearing no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
And third but not least is, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the Finance Committee meeting of Wednesday, March 21st, 2019.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the minutes for the March 21st meeting. Is there any further discussion? Had our chance to read it? Okay. So just to kind of let everyone know, everyone has seen a copy of the minutes have been emailed and sent to all of the members in advance. That's why we're not reading the minutes aloud. The minutes will be posted probably within a couple of days to our website if anybody'd like to read them. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Seeing or hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? That's unanimous, thank you.
And you're gonna defer March 20th, they were part of the agenda?
Yeah, you
Oh,
want
on the agenda?
Were they on the agenda?
Yeah, there were
agenda.
motion, I think it was just, I think I stated on the agenda just minutes. I don't think I did
All right, so if you didn't,
dates.
we don't have to defer if you didn't put
Right,
dates. Okay.
Right, unless would it be appropriate for us to?
You can defer it, that's fine, to the next meeting, you
Unless-
wanna
why
defer
don't we just
motion to
for
defer?
the sake of, since we have a copy here, why don't we do that?
Well, I
Yeah,
don't have a
motion to
copy,
defer.
but
Well, no, it's just,
I'll make a motion to defer the approval of the minutes of the Finance Committee meeting of March 20th,
Yep.
2019.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to defer the minutes for the March 20th meeting. Is there any discussion? Seeing or hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you very much. Yeah, let's do the reserve fund and get that out of the way. What we have in front of us is a reserve fund request. You want to do the motion first and we'll go into discussion?
Yep. I'll make a motion to transfer from reserve fund account number 132 to capital projects account number 932, the amount of amount of $15,000 for sewer interceptor repairs and Flansburgh drainage.
Second.
Essentially the work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly. Motion's been made and seconded to transfer from the reserve fund 13132 to account
I'm sorry.
account 932 capital projects for the purpose of finishing a repair on the sewer interceptor for Flansburgh and in Flansburgh and Grange. Is there any discussion? I didn't get this to you in advance. They've kind of overrun that, the costs of putting in that, the sewer interceptor down, it's down here behind River Run. It's kind of one of those projects we've been kind of working on for a while now. And let me just reread this so I make sure. I have to remember that.
Can I just get one clarification? The department requesting the transfer is 932?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
thank you.
All right, here. Let me make sure I have all my entire story straight here. Okay. All right, so that's purchase order. Yeah, they're kind of, what it is they're winding down on the job, and they're anticipating, or they want to make sure they have enough money to finish the job, because it came in at a higher bid than we anticipated when we decided to put the money aside for that. So that's why we're going to be, we'd like to take the money, take $15,000 from the reserve fund. Now, our reserve fund is presently at $46,000, and $46,000 and change. I can't remember how much it was. And with this, it brings us down to $32,000. We did have some discussion. We kind of think it's not going to be necessary. We were actually having a little bit of a discussion to replenish under Article 13 at the annual town meeting to replenish the reserve fund. And I kind of wanted to swing that by the committee, although with discussions with Sandy and Ken, they seem to think we're not going to have $32,000 that's going to get us to the end of the fiscal year. We will have some other transfers they're anticipating, but some of them are within the departments. Yeah, they changed the laws a couple of years ago to allow us to make transfers within the departments, but it has to come before us to be able to do those transfers. So that's kind of eased the burden that we've had on this particular fund, this reserve fund.
Yeah, that's been a big benefit.
Yeah, it is. It's helped us. We've actually, in recent years, we've actually been able to send any unused funds from the reserve fund go back into free cash, which helps keep that healthy for us. So it has been extremely helpful being able to do that. It's one of the many things, one of the reasons why we have a healthy free cash and we have a little bit of levy room. So.
I guess my question is this $15,000 amount. I'm having trouble coming up with the.
Well, I think what it is they're down there working on it presently.
I don't think they are.
Oh, they stopped?
I haven't seen work down there. This is the one on Housatonic Street, right?
No.
No.
It says the Housatonic Interceptor.
Yeah, the Housatonic River Interceptor. It's down below River Run.
Oh,
It's
not
down
at the
in hole.
bridge, not at the bridge.
No.
Oh.
We are gonna
I'm
have at the end of June, when we have our meeting in June, for the
For
special
River.
town meeting,
Okay.
because we'll do a lot of other stuff at that meeting.
I see.
We are gonna have some discussion about that, because we've been able to kind of redo some of that funding,
Oh.
so, to save ourselves some
Oh.
money.
Okay.
So we're gonna have to do a little bit of work on that. And we're kind of a busy committee of late.
So all right, so this work is still ongoing?
Yes,
and
it's
I
still
guess-
ongoing, and we wanna make sure that it's funded sufficiently to get us through to the end.
Says there's only $5,500 left in
Yeah.
the account, and they've got a change order for 1965, and like somebody's apparently figured that $15,000 is
That's the
an
estimate.
appropriate amount.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. They feel they feel that's gonna be that there'll be enough to get the project.
I'd like to not go through this again.
Yeah, I think that's why they landed at 15,000.
Okay.
We could go like 2,000 or 3,000, and then we're back here doing this all over again at the last minute. So instead of going to that level, since we have it available in our free cash also.
And as a capital project, if they don't spend it all, does that go back to free cash, or
The capital projects do not.
no?
It's actually.
What happens to them?
I was trying to remember. Sandy explained it to me
All right.
a few weeks ago. What happens is the debt is paid off. And once the debt is paid off, I'm not sure.
Goes to paying
I
the debt.
must admit, I'm not.
Goes to paying the debt off, maybe.
Yeah,
Okay.
it finishes off the debt relating to that.
Hmm.
The
I
exact.
didn't think capital projects went to free cash.
No,
They don't.
they don't.
Okay.
They do not go
Okay.
back to free cash.
So you don't want to overfund this too much.
Well, right,
Oh, yeah.
right, this,
Right.
you've got to kind of, it's a bit of a dance,
Right.
although this is coming out of a raise and appropriate, so.
Yeah.
If this money isn't expended, that could come back,
Yes.
so. That's probably,
Okay.
so everyone kind of understand what's taking place and where we're at. Yeah, cooperative team, aren't we? Why are you uncooperative? So are there any other questions concerning that? Anyone from the? Okay, seeing or hearing no further discussion on the motion to transfer $15,000 from account 132 to account 923?
32.
Or 932? Is there any further discussion? Seeing or hearing none, all those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
All those opposed? That is unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I didn't sign it. Yeah. See what happens, right? It's kind of interesting. Yeah, I'll need a copy of my files.
You have to sign the original.
And I get to sign the original, and not allow things
Yeah.
to cut checks.
Right.
Is that what it-
Sandy would be appreciative.
Yeah, she was pretty appreciative that I showed up today in the office. Let's get this out of the way. All right. And Hancock. There we are. That's, piece of housework is over. Okay. Now, the next phase to this is a discussion about, we want to start with a discussion about the coming, the coming debt exclusion, Proposition 2.5 override, or taking from the funds within the town for the new Wacona Regional High School. And I want to first, before we open the discussion up to the floor, I just want to kind of go through what each one of these things are so that the people in the audience kind of have an understanding in where the town sits with that. So the first part of the puzzle is we have to look at if this debt exclusion were to fail, how it affects the town. We have to look at that in advance, whether it is or it isn't. We have to look at that. And what would happen with if we were to take on the full burden of the school without a debt exclusion? Basically, what would happen is and I can't seem to get my spreadsheet to show up here. There it is. Okay. What will happen basically is without a debt exclusion, it would be it would mean somewhere in the vicinity of 400. Is it on there? It's around for the average house right around $470 increase in their tax bill. But there are some pitfalls that go along with that. One, of course, is it kind of vaporizes what we have for levy capacity. We presently have right around $1.2 million in levy capacity, roughly. These are going to be relatively rough numbers because these numbers are kind of a bit of a moving target, so we kind of have to deal with the rough numbers. And then we also have around $1.6 million in free cash in the town. So when you take that level of money from the town, it still leaves us, after using up all of our levy capacity, it still leaves us with approximately $515,000 to come up with, to remove from the budget. And that can be done in a host of ways. It could be done with reducing personnel. We could use money from other things that we allocate it for. Presently, we defray the costs, $250,000 from free cash to lower the tax rate and to help keep the tax rate down. That's part of what we do. So there's many things that would be affected by this, if indeed it were not to pass. And I think everyone, this is going to weigh rather heavy on the town. Whether it passes or it doesn't, it's going to weigh rather heavy. Now, the next phase is to talk about a Proposition 2.5 override. First, I'd like to kind of preface this with when you have a Proposition 2.5 override, as far as I know, a Proposition 2.5 override for a level of funding above Proposition 2.5 has never been accomplished in the state of Massachusetts. Now, Proposition 2.5, many people don't know, is a law that was put in place quite a few years ago. Actually, before I even started on the Finance Committee in '93. It was a law put forward by the people in this state. It wasn't done by legislative action. The people, it was a referendum question, I believe, or something of that nature. And what that does is Proposition 2.5 only allows the town to tax at a level of 2.5% above what the value of the town is, plus new growth. So if our town, which is presently worth $612 million, the value of our town, we can only go tax at a rate of 2.5% over what I think our budget last year was $7.5 million, I think it was. We can only go up 2.5%. And then new growth last year, we were kind of fortunate. The town actually grew at 145,000, but I happen to notice we are at 66,000 this year. So that's not a good sign when you think about it. So taxing at those levels, once you're at the max, there's no room really for growth. So it's not generally just asking for a simple Proposition 2.5 override generally won't fly, because that allows the town forever in perpetuity to tax at that level. So if the town agrees, if the townspeople were to ever agree to that, they could say, okay, we're going to allow you to go to 3%. So it's not very palatable for the people of the town. And that doesn't matter who's in the audience or where it doesn't happen. But there is a way to get that level, to get some flexibility with relationship to that. And that's with a thing called a debt exclusion. When you talk about a debt exclusion, what that does is that allows the town to set money for instance, capital expenditures and things of that nature outside of this Proposition 2.5 that I just described. The, I suppose, advantage of that is once the amount is agreed upon, and that amount is set aside or prepared to be set aside, there's a sunset date for that. It's not from here to forever. So it's estimated that it's gonna be around $1.6 million per year. Again, it's estimated for that. So that sets us up for around, to do this debt exclusion, that sets us up for around $680 a year roughly. Now you have to keep in mind the difference between the two is that we end up, in the end, if we go with the debt exclusion, we end up in the end with back to a healthy town. If we don't do a debt exclusion, we have a relatively unhealthy town from a financial viewpoint. I hope is everyone following the explanation? If you have questions, just raise your hand and I'll call on you. But we, of course, we all would like to have a healthy town when it comes to this. As for the borrowing that's going to take place, we're still kind of working on where we end up when it comes down to borrowing this money, how that affects the town overall. We're still kind of working on that. Because it is a sum of money that we are indeed responsible for, even though the school system is going to actually be borrowing the money, but because that amount of money is going to be what's called debt, hopefully, we have to cut a check to the town. I'm assuming once a year, right?
Assessments are due quarterly, so.
Okay, so it's quarterly then. Thank you. We would have to pay our share quarterly because the school has indeed gone forward. Okay. Yes.
Do we know what the annual assessment is to the town of Dalton, estimated at this point? I understand it may fluctuate just slightly, but.
Yes, so the numbers that we have used and we're using prior to now and currently, 42 million,
Yep.
4%. Interest rates are lower than 4%, and that's a
Yep.
good thing right now.
Yep.
For 30 years, 1.6 million roughly.
So
Each year.
1.6 million per year, or 30 years for the total project, and Dalton's share is?
1.6 million is
1.6
Dalton's
is Dalton's
share.
share, okay. And that's at a fixed rate? It'll be a fixed rate loan.
It will be a fixed rate loan, most likely. We haven't gotten to that point where we're either going to borrow. We have to make decisions about borrowing in the coming months. Whether we borrow temporarily and then go for the full bond after, or if we borrow now because of interest rates,
Right.
70 to 80% of the project, because that works out a little bit better financially in favor for everybody. So we'll be reviewing all of that as we move farther in this process.
And just for the record, can I get your name?
Melissa Felkowski.
Thank you.
Do you need me to spell the last name? Okay.
The
When would
assistant school superintendent.
When would the first year's assessment, or first quarter's assessment hit us?
There was an agreement with the school committee, and the regional agreement, I think, was modified so that the first quarterly payment is due not over the summer, not right when the fiscal year begins, but in September or thereabouts. And so we have payments.
This coming September?
No, not this coming September, at the earliest, next September.
Earliest?
If we go to the full bonding,
would
it'll be
September 2020.
20. It'll be
FY
less
20.
than 1.6 million if we temporarily, use a band for a couple of years till we
Yeah.
permanently bond. It'll be less, because those are interest-only payments.
Right.
But-
then it'll be more, assuming rates go up.
It will always be more. The first couple of years are interest-only, then it will be more. If rates go up, and it's always going to be more, because
Because
then you have to
principal will be involved.
start paying the principal, yes.
So it won't, I just wanted to be clear, sorry, Karen, go ahead. There will be no effect on this particular fiscal year that we've just approved or are
No.
in the process of approving for a budget.
Right.
which will set the tax rate in November.
Right. These numbers,
There'll be
the
no
numbers
effect
that
on
are
that.
on this spreadsheet,
Right.
basically what we're doing is we're trying to use
Right,
what we
This
presently
year,
know
right,
we
yeah,
have.
yeah,
This
that's all
is-
we can
this
work
is-
with, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
we know what we have for FY 2020.
right.
That's what's in front of us. So what we're doing is, and clearly, there will be, of course, increases in the budget. So these numbers are actually rather low right now for the numbers that we have on the spreadsheet that's up on the board. So it's gonna, definitely will go up from what we're seeing presently.
What do you mean by that? Sorry.
Well, with the overall.
Next year's
picture
budget
is-
will be higher than this year's budget.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely. So it isn't
So
just-
1.6 million will be a lower percentage of our cost. Trying to find a silver lining here.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But
Not a lot of silver linings in this.
basically, the
one. For what
1.6
it's worth.
million is either added to the tax rate, strict, not added. It's added to the cost, which means you have to pare down the, each department's expenditures or some other variation thereof
Yeah.
to raise that amount of money, or this debt exclusion
Right,
is an option, which is outside of all of that. It still becomes a taxpayer burden,
absolutely.
or
Well, no
this-
matter what, exactly.
Right.
No matter what happens,
still,
the town, the taxpayers of this town will indeed have a tax burden of some kind.
right,
And kind of our job, sitting at this table, is to try to mitigate that burden as best we can. You know, and I don't quite know how we would go about that. We're still we're kind of in the infancy stage
Mhm.
of those discussions.
Mhm.
I don't really have a lot to offer. I wish I had more, but we're sometime in the next couple of weeks, we'll be meeting with our financial advisor. It's a big numbers thing is what it is, but I'll have an ample opportunity to ask questions about some of the things that may take place, or that can take place. It's,
Is there a maximum on our debt exclusion that we can go up to?
Well, the maximum borrowing that the town has available,
Yeah.
that's what I'm waiting to kind of find out, and that's where, when we get to our financial advisor, we'll know then how far up we can go, because we've got some big things coming our way as well.
That's what my-
And part of it is that the debt exclusion and the debt that's actually taken on is taken on by the school system, not really by the town.
then assessed it.
And then it's assessed to the town. But don't, I guess we as a town shouldn't be lulled into a false sense of security in that respect, because it's a $30+ million obligation that we have for the next 30 years.
Mhm.
It's something that, it's almost
It's a mortgage. payment.
pushing 40, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a mortgage payment, and we're responsible for what it takes to pay that off for that period of time.
Right.
And it's not easy, and that payment amounts to almost 10% of the whole budget.
Well, sure.
When you think about our overall budget, it's $7.8 million.
Right.
$1 million of that now it's gonna be $8+ million. It's gonna be approaching $9 million budget. That approaching $9 million budget now, of that budget, over 10% of that budget goes just to that building. That's kind of get your attention on it. And when I've had those discussions many times.
Do
But
we have-
we're obligated.
Do we have current debt exclusion on the books now?
Yeah, we have a fair amount of debt exclusion. I don't know the
They're
exact.
relatively small. I mean, they're bonds that are running off,
I thought so.
so that
Yeah,
they're not
bonds that are
significant
running
dollar
off.
amounts,
Let
but
me,
and they go over, I think, 3 more years.
So the ones that are coming off will
Right here.
not,
Isn't that what it is?
will not materially affect,
Well,
offset this cost.
But those were from generally small bonds to support a piece
Right.
of capital equipment
So
for.
the dollar amounts are very small.
And therefore, there'll be something replaced. I mean,
Right.
the next time you need a roof.
Right, something else will take its place.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, the things that the town has to be thinking about from a town's viewpoint. We've got South Street, or not South Street, we've got the
Dalton Division Road.
Dalton Division Road, we don't know what that number is
Right.
yet. The engineering for that, we have, they're about to write, I think within the next few weeks, we're gonna write the paper for the old Dalton High School demolition. And we know for sure that we have some sewer problems coming.
Right.
But we know that for sure, we don't know the magnitude of those. We also, they need, on our highway garage, that needs a roof.
Mhm.
So it's not like this is gonna, this is something that's kinda going away either, so.
And then this whole drainage and infiltration study too.
Absolutely, well, that's that one, we don't know how much that's gonna be at
No.
this point, I don't know, we don't know how much that bid's gonna be on that.
And they may not come up soon, but
Yeah.
It's coming.
It's coming, and hopefully when it comes around, it won't be as expensive as we think it's gonna be. But then on to tie, and keep in mind, this sewer issues, most of that goes under the sewer user fees. But still at the same
Still coming out of
time,
my
it's coming out of the taxpayer's pocket.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
It's, and it's like building a new school, the same thing. Granted, we have locally this much money, but the rest of it has to come out of the taxpayer's pocket. It's all out of the taxpayer's pocket regardless of, it's all coming out of one pocket, and it's the taxpayer. That's the bottom line here with all of this. So we just need to, we need to make sure that however the tax dollars are spent, we're making the best, we're making the best of the taxpayers' dollars. They've entrusted us with them. We
So
wanna
one
do
other
that.
question, if the town approves a debt exclusion, then that's a line item of its own. It's just a
Yeah.
line item of its own anyway. But does that forebode any approvals in the future or disapprovals of the future, in the future on our part for other departmental budget reviews? I mean, there could still be cuts made to help to offset that cost of the debt
There's not,
exclusion.
exactly, there could be, what's kind of really interesting about that is that discussion has indeed taken place. And it's an obligation we have to do, whether we like it or not. It doesn't affect Proposition 2.5, but the question everyone has to ask themselves are, at what point do the taxpayers say uncle?
Right, yeah.
That's
Yeah,
the real question.
Yeah.
You know, at some point, I'm quite honestly think we're gonna have to cut the town budget to accomplish this $1.6 million obligation. At what level, I don't know.
Right.
How it's gonna take place,
Hmm.
you know, when it comes down to that level of funding and that kind of money, it's big.
When we go in.
I'm kind of, that's why it's kind of, this same discussion took place a few weeks ago prior to the vote, and we had the same concerns then, and we've got them now, but now we've got to think more instead of, we have to think more about how, now that this has taken place,
Mhm.
we have to think now more about how we can make it happen with the least burden. Yes.
Maybe this is not a question that would even matter, but what if another town out of the 7 says, we just can't do this?
Well, I
Does
don't
the
know.
remainder then fall, get spread around the towns that,
Is that an
Would
option,
it-
Melissa?
I would
I don't think that's an
have-
option.
No, but what
Melissa's
if-
saying, I'm sorry, but you can't say no.
but what if it devastates the town?
Well, that,
Um,
for instance, I would have to say, I suppose, if a town were to go into receivership, I would, and this is just speculation completely on my part, if something like that were to happen and they were found unable to meet that obligation, it goes around all the other towns, I would assume. And that is an assumption completely on my part. It is indeed something that has to be.
Because as you said earlier, it's the school taking on the debt, and then they're apportioning it to the 7 towns to come up with their share of the payment,
Yes,
and it's not an option,
no.
so. unless
So one of the
somebody
big impacts is the fact that indirectly or directly, depending on which happens, it's gonna affect the mill rate in the town. And, you know, at $22 or $23
Right.
thousand, people are not gonna buy in Dalton. They're gonna buy somewhere else. I mean, Pittsfield's running the same problem, so it's not like the options are,
Hmm.
you know,
Couldn't agree
ever
more.
flowing, but what happens is that, from an economic point of view, and that's not just finance, that's more like
Right.
economic development, but that creates a huge problem in Dalton if we
Absolutely.
see people selling or avoiding because they don't wanna go forward.
Well, something too to keep in mind is, you know, we have a very healthy levy limit presently.
Yes. Which is a good thing to have.
Yeah, but I've seen in less than 2 years go from a very healthy levy limit
Oh, yeah.
to being almost, I think we bottomed out, I wanna say it was in 96 or
You've been through this.
97.
Right,
I've been
right.
through this.
Right.
And we bottomed out at one point, we bottomed out at $35,000. Yeah, we're presently at 1.2. We're in a pretty nice position, but it took us 2 years.
Hmm.
And that was during the insurance crisis.
Hmm.
So, I don't know if many people remember the insurance crisis, but the school system was hit pretty hard with it. We were seeing double-digit increases in the school budget.
Hmm.
Thanks be to the school administration of late, that's been, many other factors as well, but that has been one of the things that's helped the town stay healthy, is that we haven't seen those kinds of increases coming from the district, which is the single largest budget in our entire operation. When you start seeing double-digit increases in that budget, you start going like, oh, geez, now where do we go? So it's tough to do. So that's kind of what we're up against. I don't know what else to tell people. We have to continue forward as a town. We have to continue forward in the hopes that properties don't begin to devalue. And if that 600, and as I stated many times before, the new growth in this town has been virtually stagnant for over 10 years. We had, the first time we crossed $100,000 was in 2019.
Yeah.
Or 2018.
And we've got a decreasing
2018.
student population, decreasing town
Absolutely,
population.
absolutely.
And the other thing we should remember, you know, when we ran into 10 years ago with a potential question of should we close the school in Washington
Absolutely.
that we had built, and, you know, it came to light that it should have been a good reminder to everyone that once we approved and took the bond debt on that school, you basically, whether you close the school or not, you still had to pay the bond off.
But you still have to-
And if you close the school, you had to pay back the state the 30 or 40 or 50% subsidy they provided for us to build the school. So there is always a potential liability out there when you take on one of these agreements with the state.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The state is pretty relentless when they.
I mean, if we
They offer
needed
up
to
money,
build it,
it's
you
not
can't be
free.
closing it down later on.
Right. Closing the school is,
Keeping the money. But they-
yes.
On the debt,
You know,
because if we turn
Yes,
around
speak
and
up.
we increase it, right? We don't know, right now we have a good bond rating, correct? So if our bond rating changes, does our interest change? Are we gonna be able to lock in?
Well, that's,
Where's, because if that
On
does over
future debt or the
time,
current debt?
on the future debt.
Future debt's different.
Yeah.
Current debt gets locked in
Yeah,
when they
well, we
sign
have
a
it.
bond.
Okay,
Right.
so that isn't gonna fluctuate over time. That is fine.
yeah, the bond rating at the present time of the
But it
borrow.
will change
The
our
bonding,
borrowing. It's
the
gonna,
bond
if we
rating,
Yes.
take on new
For
bonds,
future
so
cans or
this is
bans or
done.
bonds,
This,
yeah.
let's just say it's,
Right.
that's done. Now, we need to borrow again. That's gonna affect us.
it's gonna
It
cost
could.
us more money to borrow,
Right?
yes.
Okay.
Depending on what our income.
Well, right, I know that, yeah, based on that and whatever, okay. So this thing can just.
Yeah, I think we're gonna be on a bit of a roller coaster. I
Okay.
would say a good solid 10 years, if not more, on a financial roller coaster. That's what we're up against.
Bill, when's the
Yes.
7 million we're gonna have to owe on the sewer, through Pittsfield? and what Hinsdale has
Well,
their share.
that's
When's
an
that
interesting,
come to?
that's a good question. I have been asking that question. Basically, it's kind of the same thing as the school really, is what will happen is the city of Pittsfield will just kind of tell us in advance and then send us a bill. And we get to pay it, and I think that one's quarterly as well. That one we don't get the debt excluded. We don't get to go into we're talking about we've been trying to get Pittsfield to be a little more cooperative with us so that maybe we can go and say, look at how much is it for us to, because our bond rating's probably a little better than Pittsfield, because they're strung out a little bit from those schools and that. Our bond rating might be a little better. Well, why can't we borrow money to go and pay you off with whatever it is that you need? Why can't we go and do that and save ourselves a bunch of money? Because if they go and take a bond at a higher rate, we get to pay that higher rate.
Right.
Thank you very much, kind of thing. So that's, as far as I know, we can't do that yet, but that's.
It's coming.
But we don't know
Yeah,
when
Ken's
this is gonna be.
Ken's called him and he's getting nothing but crickets on the other end, so.
I'm under the impression it won't be too long from now.
No, I would say by this time next year,
So
the
about
sewer
the
user
same
fees
time
are gonna
as this
go.
other one hits.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So, well, the sewer user fees will probably, the higher sewer user fees will be seen in fiscal 2021.
2021.
I would have to say, just judging by what
Fiscal-
I'm hearing and
Fiscal
seeing.
2021.
Fiscal
So that's the same as
2021.
the school.
21.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Calendar
yeah,
year 20, fiscal 2021.
yes, yes,
Tom had a question.
yes.
Tom Callahan, co-chair of the school project. I gotta be candid with you folks. I sense a tone amongst you that is overwhelmingly against the school project. I haven't heard in the 2 times I've been down here recently a positive issue said about the school. And it seems to me that we could stay here for some time this evening and come up with a lot of other ways this will impact the town. But I think that you might be overlooking the fact why we're about building a new school. And as far as all the things that you're saying, but for example, the desire for people to buy elsewhere, I really don't think, with the reputation Dalton has, that a new school would deter people from settling here, if they could. But everything you bring up, my interpretation is tied to that school. The school's to blame for the woes. It might be the cause, but it isn't to blame. Obviously, this is a huge financial endeavor. And the people chose to do it, albeit not by much. But they did, nonetheless, choose to do this. And there's a lot of sacrifices to be made, but if you end up agreeing or promoting a no vote to debt exclusion, I think that you're going to make things very difficult for people. Now I'm talking about the youth, the people who board buses, taking away plowing hours, whatever. All the things you've said could impact the safety of people. If that's a way to convince people to vote against the debt exclusion, it's not a very good way to do it.
I don't think any of us are against the debt exclusion. It's just that as we go over this, we have to talk about both sides, because we've faced this before, not with the schools per se, but with the debt exclusions. And if you don't do the debt exclusion, there were years we were losing police officers. There were years that we couldn't replace, fire engines in a different district, but equipment like that, town equipment. Just because we couldn't afford it, so we had to put it off. At the same time, we've heard during those years, a number of people have said, hey, we don't want to just take it on the nose ourselves. And again, it's only with the school district that we really run into that gray area, because if it's with the town, you either don't buy it or you buy it. With the school district, based on the way it goes, whether we vote or not, it's the school district's vote. And if the school district votes for it, whether or not the town supported 100% or was against it, you know, the original agreement said you'd go with the school district. And so that's why I think there becomes a level of discussion that wasn't there. But I don't think any of us is necessarily against the debt exclusion. It's just your two options, as Bill explained it. If we exclude the debt, that means the individual tax rate's gonna go up a higher amount. If we don't exclude the debt, basically we've gotta find a way through the town budget to pay our share, which means that we're gonna have to max the 2.5 every year to get there. But during that time, as you can raise the 1.6 million a year, there's gonna be cuts, and as what we said, it's gonna be at least $250,000 to $500,000 that we gotta find in the town budget, which is a real problem for us, that's all.
And you also have to understand, we've got 2 new members on this board who have no idea of certain things. And that's why we have to explain it to them. They're just coming on. So you have to be a little understanding and patient with Bill and with us so that we can bring them up to speed, so that we can answer their questions as well.
There are many people, just a second, that keep in mind, there are many people out there that simply don't understand the debt exclusions. They don't understand Proposition 2.5.
Correct.
They don't understand levy limits. Many people do not understand that. And these discussions, whether they're positive, negative, or indifferent, these discussions have to take place in order for people to grasp what's about to take place. Now, we intend to have a motion tonight, whether to exclude or not to exclude, the same as the select board did. We will continue probably even after the motion is done. We'll have a discussion on the motion, may have to change the wording or something of that nature. But there will be a motion and seconded, and we'll talk about it. But there's not one of us have said, no, we're not gonna support a debt exclusion. My opinion, and it's clearly an opinion, is that a debt exclusion allows us the flexibility to try and look at all of the options we have in front of us, and that's what we're talking about, are the options, the things that we have in front of us. We have a big egg in front of us that we need to figure out how to pay for it. And that's all this discussion is about at this point. You know, that doesn't say that we're for or against at this moment. It's more of how do we do this? John, please.
Hi, Joe Diver, 51 Audrey Drive. Just a couple of points, and out of respect out of the committee, I think everybody's trying to do the best we can at the end of the day. I think there are a couple of things that, for learning lessons for our town, this journey has been 2 years in the making. We approved a feasibility study for $850,000. Now we're moving through to the vote. The understanding of what's coming down from Pittsfield and all the other charges were known 2 years ago. We've known this egg is in front of us for that long. We need to educate the town on the difference between a levy limit increase and debt exclusion. And the key element for me as a voter, and you're all here representing the voters, the key element for me is on the levy limit, it never comes down. It stays after the debt is paid. Once you raise that levy limit, you can keep it there. The debt exclusion will go away. That's what the town needs to know. The difference in the fee is about $175 between those two choices. Do you want to invest another $175 to go debt exclusion so we keep the town healthy? That's what the direction we should be heading this town in. And I urge you as a voter to make sure you make it clear debt exclusion is the right choice for this town, short term and long term. Thank you.
Thanks, Billy. I think everything's been covered pretty well. Great points by Mike, great points by yourself. And understanding this process, I understand it because it's insider baseball. I've been at it for years. It's like, oh heck, so have you. But there are plenty of people that don't understand it, and maybe even at the speed and at home watching that don't understand about debt exclusions, Proposition 2.5. But I'm going to cut right to the issue because you've already covered it very well. If we don't get this debt exclusion, and yourself and I had been there before, the Finance Committee, it amounts to $500,000 to $600,000 we have to make up out of the town budget, town operating budget. It's gotta come out of that. Mike's nodding, he understands that. Billy understands that. Jeff, you alluded to budgets before. You said, well, this would have to come out of all the town budgets. Not true, because what happens when you go down this path, not all town operating budgets can be cut. Some are contractual obligations. For instance, is bonding indebtedness. You have to pay it. You can't not pay it. You're contractually obligated to pay it. We have other contractual obligations. There's such things as health insurance, and there's many budgets out of the 100 and something in the town. How many is there, Billy? 200 budgets?
No, actually, I think it's like 80,
Yeah.
80,
Yeah. Well, anyway,
something like that. It's a lot of budgets.
a lot of them cannot be cut because of financial obligations, contractual obligations, legal obligations. So what happens is you get down to this $500,000, $600,000 the select board has to cut in conjunction with the finance committee and the town manager. Now, where do you go? You have to go to this most expendable services. And where is that? The first thing that would be closed would be the senior center. Probably the second thing, the library would be impacted. The third thing would probably be recreation, our contribution to the CRA. Fourth, you go after the big budgets, police and highway, because they're a big dollar amount. So you cut them. All these things are loss of services to Daltonians who have expected these services over the year. So, if you vote for debt exclusion, you're voting to continue our way of life in this community. If you vote against it, you're basically voting to cut town services. And Bill, you remember this, the last time we did this, town has definitely never actually recovered from that. We're still operating on 4 days a week, the town hall is open. Most of the employees up there are part-time workers, not part-time, but they're not full-time 40-hour workers either. So that's where we're headed here. And a lot of the comments that have been made tonight are very salient, but they're peripheral. The black and white issue is, if you don't support the debt exclusion, we're going to be forced to dramatically reduce town services. And this is the same debate same debate the select board had the other evening. And after the same debate, Billy was there, he represented his point very well. We're just not sure how to wrap our arms around this. The select board voted unanimously to support a debt exclusion. Now, Bill and I are here tonight, hopeful that you would support the same position and that we have a united government in favor, united town government in favor of this proposition that will be on the ballot. That's another problem. There are 0 contests, political contests on the ballot on the 13th. Hence, lack of interest. I don't know how that plays. If it's pro or con, there's no way of guessing. There's no way of knowing. But it will be a limited turnout. So, for our way of life, in the service level that we have in this town, and I think it's become an expected thing, it's vital that we pass and support the debt exclusion. If there's any questions, I mean, I can try to answer them, and Bob can try to answer them about, any peripheral issues or financial issues or things we haven't considered yet. No one, huh? Okay, thanks.
Because we've already pretty well discussed it.
Yeah, done a great job. It's building. That's the first thing when you're a public servant, and you have the opportunity. You're in front of the camera tonight to educate the public. You did a great job, Mike. What you added was absolutely essential to the debate. No, it is. We don't have the select board doesn't have an Eagle reporter anymore. He quit or went off to Milwaukee or something. So this is only our only opportunity in front of the cameras to explain to the people out there what's going on in simplistic terms so they can try to understand and make an informed decision. And the select board supports the debt exclusion, and hopefully this board will too. Thank you.
I fully support what John Boyer just said.
Bob, I want to say something. I want to point out, one final thing. I always got one final thing.
I've known this for years.
Yeah, I know that. Because I'm a slow thinker. I walk away. Oh, Jesus, I should have said that. But Bob, when we had a debate on the board whether to support the school, Bob was against it. He had very good reason. He says, you know, if you pack the LE, Bob, you know, this and that and this and that. But when we had this debate the other night about how to fund this, Bob was in full support of this and said, actually, this is the only sane way to go. So he was against the school, but he supports this methodology of addressing this situation. Bob could have said that for himself, but I'm a blabbermouth.
Okay, like John said, yeah, I was against it for the cost point only. But what I'm here tonight to say, please support it. I'm heartbroken people are moving out of town because they can't afford to stay here. And I can't really wrap my arms around people losing their jobs over this also. I mean, this is only, like John said, it's the only sane way of doing this. We need to pull together. The school's coming, whether we like it or not. The school is already voted in. We gotta support it. And we gotta band together to get it done. And we will work with you guys as much as we can, but we really need to have this override pass, okay? Thank you.
Man, just one other addition, just real. Just one other addition, because I met some seniors the other day at the select board meeting, and also at the senior center. And the seniors certainly make a strong case of their concerns. I think we also have an opportunity to educate some of our seniors who may have financial constraints of the opportunity with the state laws and state regs. The real estate tax exemption rules that the state offers those seniors. I think we have to educate those seniors of those opportunities, as well as have a commitment from the school committee and the school board that we shave as much off as we can as we go through this process. You're gonna make choices of where you're gonna invest those savings. It could be a good, better, best kind of decision, but collaboratively working together, I think we have opportunity to shave some of that cost off. So this is also a time for our town and also the rest of the towns in the CBRSD to really come together and see a very successful development of the school. 30 years from now, who knows what our education model is going to be. But so do we have an opportunity to leverage the school building for mixed use opportunities, meaning bring in more college classes as locally in Dalton or something to increase the value or the return of that opportunity. So thinking innovatively around those edges. But I think we also have those opportunities to educate our seniors about those programs and then work collaboratively how to shave some of this off as we go through the process. So thanks again, Bill. Appreciate it.
Billy, did I just say one final thing? Again, Joe, I'm glad you brought it up. We realized that, hey, well, I should say senior citizens. We're all senior citizens, except for a couple. Anyway, the impact it would have on senior citizens. And John Bartel, myself, and Bob were very concerned about that issue. And John went to meet with some senior citizens the other evening. Didn't have much of a turnout. But ways to mitigate this. I had a whole list of things we've got proposed to mitigate the cost and impact the senior citizens. Had it written down in a note on the kitchen table. Guess what? I left it there. But what Joel hit it on, that's what struck me, is there's a couple of 3 exemptions from the assessors for the elderly, senior citizens again, for veterans survivors, widows. There's another one I can't come to mind, but there's also, as you heard at the selectmen's meeting the other night, the CRA has a good neighbor fund. Well, they will give a senior eligibility, if he's eligible income-wise, $500. Quick turnaround. That was Ellison's words. I think you heard that. And then one other thing, we have a work-off program, work off your taxes, we just implemented to work off at various jobs in town where you can work off your tax bill. So that's another option. And one other thing I'd like to point out is senior citizens, a lot of them in our community, have the opportunity to live in senior housing. You know, I think there's over 200 units, counting River Run, Pine Grove Manor, and yeah. So and that's an option, and taxes don't affect those people because it's state funded, and
Well,
that's the way it is. So
one thing when we do need to talk about that, when you do speak of those incentives. for
Yep, options,
seniors,
yes.
Keep in mind that reduces the revenue that the town has coming in from that direction. So, back to the double-edged sword kind of thing. You know, we got.
Catch
the money
22,
come-
you're right.
The money comes from one place, but then not from the other. If you think about it, one of the points that was made to me by a person, of course, that supported the school was, well, just don't have your latte each day and it'll pay for it, or don't go out for pizza once a week. But there's an interesting twist to that. What about the poor guy that's making a pizza? You stop buying a pizza, that guy starves. So those are the things that and it was brought to my attention recently. So everyone can make a case, but regardless of the case that's here, today we're looking at a debt of $30+ million for 30 years.
One other thing I think I want to point out is for the last 4 years, the school district's done a wonderful job of finding wherever it can to minimize the increase on most of the towns. And it's been, 4 years ago, it was an issue as to how much we were going to continue increase because our budget was growing and it's just non-sustainable. And again, under current management, it's done a great job of trying to make those increases level or modest as much as possible. And again, you've got insurance and such things that are not within your control. You know, that said, that's kind of a partnership that hopefully will continue because as much as we have two ways of looking at this, one definitely devastates the town's operations in some manner. And again, John's example of going to 4 days a week and they've never recovered from that is the perfect example. You know, they couldn't wipe out, well, you could wipe out the police and have the state police do it, but nobody wants to look that way. But I mean, we're talking those kind of dollars. And there isn't, you know, as Terry used to say, you know, we're kind of damned if we are and we're damned if we don't, but the bottom line is that we're here to support, you know, the town finances, and town finances pretty much need an override, even if that may or may not be best for individuals based on their own judgment. And the override is probably the only way it doesn't do some serious damage to the town's operation.
No, right.
Add to that, if you don't mind. I'm glad you brought up the expenses. I have to tell you this, when I got asked to get on board this project, I wouldn't have come close to that if the central office was not in order.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, this was going to be what it is. It's become a divisive issue, a lot of money. But that office has done a remarkable job with the finances, or a lot of us wouldn't touch this. Number two, they cannot control the mandates coming from DESE, the Department of Education and Secondary Ed. They're laying more on school districts now than ever. And we all know there's a push by town officials, superintendents all over the Commonwealth to get more aid to support some of that. It isn't fair, particularly to rural districts like this. But that is something we cannot control, irregardless of what else is going on. I will have to reiterate, the management, the fiscal management down there is very, very well done.
Nice job, Melissa. Well done, Tom.
Melissa?
I just wanted to say thank you for mentioning the budget increases have been very fiscally responsible. Over the last 5 years, it's only been 0.82% average. We had 1 year in there because of insurances cost that was 2.77%, but every other year from that year has been 1%, under 1%. And any of our free cash, like what a town would call free cash, we call excess and deficiency. We give back to the towns in the following year. We only keep $250,000 in the bank. The rest goes back to the towns, of which Dalton gets 66% of, to reduce assessments. So,
That's not the way it always was.
well,
That's one of the big reasons
actually,
it's
yes.
improved over the last 4 or 5
It's only
years.
60%, I'm sorry for this,
But
because it's not, yes. But, so that does help, and any time that we have, this year we received rural aid that Mr. Callahan was talking about. We received that, and the first thing I think of, and the superintendent and the people that work with us, is how can we help with next year's budget? How can we help to keep next year's budget level? If the rules allow us, we will do so. If for rural aid, we had to spend it by the end of this year. So what we did was purchase technology that we didn't have to put in the budget. So there's always that thinking that we want to minimize the cost, the assessments to the towns, because we realize that the school department is a big part of every town's budget in the district.
Yeah, that's something, that's one of the main reasons we've become a relatively healthy town. And if, of course, the world is not perfect, but when it comes down to the school district and the school's budget, every effort from here forward has to be made to keep that budget at 1% or 2%. When it comes down to the school budget, believe it or not, up until I think it was 4 years ago. Was it 4 years ago,
4 or
Mike?
5, 4 and 9.
Yeah, the school did not receive a positive vote from me on their school budget. And the reason that the school did not do that is because they were unwilling, and I know you and Laura haven't been there that long, really, have you?
This is my 7th year.
Well, this is your 7th, okay. It was difficult to understand that you need to kind of stay, because of the troubles that we have with Proposition 2.5, that budget needs to remain, that budget, and that goes for every town, the Proposition 2.5 goes for every single town in the state. To have the school stay at that 2.5% plus new growth, and new growth can be whatever it is, but having a school keep their overall operating budget at that 2.5% is imperative.
Or lower. Yeah.
Or lower.
Well,
2.5%
And
or
again,
lower.
like I say,
Lower,
last 5
much
years you've done
better,
wonderful.
right, for all of us. So, and they've been, in the past 4 years or so, that's been the case, and we need to be focused on keeping it that way, because at this point, this goes back to all the other discussions we've had. It goes back to the point of it's becoming difficult to afford all of the things that are going on in this town. Yes.
I do want to add, though, as Tom had said, some things are out of our control.
Well, we know that. We have
And
the same problem.
If reimbursements, we pay for, the district and the towns pay for the transportation. We're reimbursed in the following year. We anticipate a certain percentage of reimbursement. If the state has a rough year, that's not
Yeah,
what
I
we
know.
get.
We've already-
So some things are beyond our control.
We
There are
get it.
there are regulations that come down that without funding behind them. And so there are some things that we just can't control, but as long as I am there, I promise you that I will be fiscally responsible. I will be at every of the working group meetings for the building, which are starting next week. We've made some progress in the RFQ for our construction manager at risk, which should lower the rates, lower the cost, because the firm's on board from the beginning. There'll be less change orders. So there are lots of things that will be monitored. The whole project will be monitored, and I will be at all of those meetings, as will the superintendent. That's just the way we operate, and
I do have a question. Have we employed a clerk of the works yet? Do we know what a clerk of the works is?
I do know what a clerk of the works
Okay,
is.
just checking.
But
Not that
I
they-
Very premature.
Yeah,
I don't
great.
know if I
think
have
so. I agree. Are we planning it?
I'm not sure that I have to. We have to.
I think we should.
Who's
If
we?
you'd like to know that from a construction and engineering viewpoint, we need to have one person that is in and on the payroll or contracted by this district to oversee that project.
Oh, we've had one from the beginning, our project manager.
I get that's different.
That's
That project manager makes sure that the products that are coming in on time. They handle the scheduling, they make sure all the ducks are kind of landing in a row. But a clerk of the works makes sure that when those tiles are put down, they're put down with the proper glue, They're put down properly, the way they're supposed to be. They did it in Nesicus, and let me tell you something, we ended up with a nice school. And that's, and as I understand it, that did not happen at the Conic. And because it didn't happen at the Conic's got some pretty serious problems out there right now. Because they didn't have a person that had the authority to tell the contractor, get your crap together and do it the way it's supposed to be done. Not just throw some piece of garbage up and hope that it flies by some project manager that's got 15 other things that he's got scheduled that he needs to get done.
We do have, the company that is the project manager does have a person dedicated to us that will be there every day. I'm not putting, there will be district representatives there as well, but I will certainly talk with the superintendent and the building committee about it, about your suggestion.
His name is Jim Moran, Bill, and you might want to meet him, because what you're talking about is certainly valid. You gotta have somebody there.
I want
Checking every
somebody
night.
completely independent of all of the people that are involved in that
Yeah.
mess over there.
Yeah.
Because I
Well,
have
it's a school.
a lot of other,
Not a mess.
I have, well, that's a whole,
Not
for
the high
another.
school.
Anytime you wanna
that's
meet
for another
Mr.
time.
Moran, just let me
No,
know.
not the
Yeah.
fact, this is-
Absolutely.
Bill, if you wanna meet Mr. Moran, just let one of us know, and you'll meet.
Two last comments from this peanut gallery.
We're gonna wrap this up.
First comment, I want to say thank you, Bill. I sent an email to Ken to ask you to have the open forum, and open
Yeah.
dialogue, so I appreciate that very much. And second, I absolutely agree with you on the clerk of the works. We don't call it that in healthcare, but I've run some very large healthcare projects, implemented EMRs, and having an independent contractor there representing the investment view and need for good quality deployment is a critical function. So it'll be great to meet Jim. I think he covers those components and those activities. Independent may be something to explore, but anyways, I do think that quality is there, but it is a very good point that you brought up. And again, thank you for having the open forum tonight. So.
All right. We'd like to, first and foremost, is everyone satisfied with the discussions we've had so far?
No, I wanna go for another hour.
Yeah, no, I'm getting real thirsty right now, so, just saying. So, are there any other questions, since we have people here that can probably answer some for us?
I do appreciate being one of the movies Karen talked about.
Well, that's right, being new to this, it's important that we discuss, being new to this, and to be honest with you, Karen hasn't been through it, and Jeff, you haven't even really been through
Not
this kind of,
significant.
this
No.
significant. Mike went through the 2009 episode, and I went through both the 2009 and the 90s, the mid-90s. That was about a 4-year episode that we went through. And we had some long nights here to decide on some pretty important things. So I just want to make sure that everybody is comfortable
No.
with, well, what do you like?
What
We're
it's-
comfortable with
It's hard
bringing the
discussion.
motion
It's-
forward.
it is. It's-
I'm not sure what the do you know what article number it is on the
It's the only question in the ballot.
question?
Mike's got a copy right there.
Okay.
You got it.
I think it's the only question, it's not an article, right?
Oh, right,
It's
It's on the ballot question on the 13th, in the general election.
Right.
right, it's a general,
The only
general
question,
elections.
yes or
So
no?
if you would like to fashion a motion for that, I would entertain it.
You making a motion?
Yeah, I know it's in there, I read it right.
Do you want it anything more than the moves that we are vote in favor of,
That we support
this?
Support.
I don't think it's in the town report, I think it's on the warrant.
Oh, yeah, I think you're right,
Yeah,
that's
but it
right.
basically, it's a yes or no. You vote
Yeah.
yes for the debt exclusion or no. So your motion would be, I move that we
Yeah.
approve.
I'd make a motion that we, that the finance committee, support,
Recommend.
it recommends to support the approval of the debt exclusion, ballot question,
For the school finance.
well, for the school finances.
Second.
A motion has been made and seconded for the finance committee to support the question relating to the debt exclusion for the new Wacona Regional High School. Is there any other discussion? No? Russ? set? Okay. Seeing or hearing none, all those in favor of the debt exclusion, please signify in the usual manner.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That is unanimous.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill, I don't know if we should have a motion or whether or not we should just do it, but I think I think it makes some sense to have you as the chairman put together something to the school committee, outlining our concerns, anywhere from, you know, the clerk of works to anything else on that. I don't know if you'd rather just do that on your own, or would you rather have a motion to do it?
If a well, I would, whenever it comes to anything, I kind of handle things a little kind of differently than many others, and many other chair people do in other committees, but I would like a motion to direct the chairman.
Okay.
If that's felt that it's needed, then we should.
Well, I think it makes some sense because, you know, we all have individual concerns, and they may not, you know, have anything other impact, but, you know, you've got a lot of construction background, certainly Jeff's got a lot of background
Absolutely.
in, you know, basically engineering and architecture, and the rest of us in finance, and it's like, so I guess I move that the finance committee, send, chairman, send a letter to the, Central Berkshire Regional School District or the school committee, outlining any of the concerns that we can put together regarding things that may impact this, anywhere from the clerk of the works to whatever else we're talking about.
Second it?
Motion has been made to instruct the chairman of the finance committee to produce a letter, outlining our concerns and other discussions about the school and how the school is being put together. Is there any discussion?
I'm not sure how and when and what the content is of such a letter. Is it only go one letter, or are there multiple letters? Does this happen over time?
Well, I mean,
Is
I
it
think.
something we all have some input into suggesting to
that's
Bill to
the-
put in the letter?
That's
Well,
part
that's
of
what
the
I would think
discussion.
Bill would feel to talk to us about, but I
Okay.
mean.
Before
I
you-
It sounds a
do
little
think-
open-ended to give a.
Well, I think it is, but I do think it's something that we've
I'm
had
not
enough
saying Bill
concerns.
screw up, I'm just
We might as
suggesting
well
that there's.
No.
put it in writing and send it out.
Yeah, it's-
Sent out as correspondence,
Yeah.
and it goes to all the departments usually,
Yeah.
within.
Yeah.
Maybe copy select board, I don't know, you
It
decide.
goes-
Yeah,
to us,
it
pretty
would,
much every one of us.
in this case,
Yeah.
judging by the way this is written, I would say during our discussion, we should first talk about what is contained in gonna be the content of the letter.
Yeah.
And with that, after that discussion, I'll make sure everyone on the committee sees the letter before it goes, and by all means, please send it, it's gonna be in a Word format for you to send back your comments, and we'll keep going until we get no returns. So if it takes me a week to get the letters back and get it written the way this committee would like to see it written.
They don't expect to start construction till next year anyway.
Right. Well, we'll be way before
There'll
that.
be some things happening in the fall, but yes, full construction next year, next spring.
Okay. What would we
So
like
moved
to
and seconded.
Well, the question is, I suppose, during discussion. do we
Based on
wanna
what you
talk
said,
about-
I'm okay with it. Then we'll get a chance to see what you send before you send it.
Right, so we.
Not one of your tirades.
Yeah.
You haven't done that in years, though.
Yeah.
You haven't done that in years.
Even tirade to be in order.
That is pretty fortunate, I haven't gone crazy. So it's, I lost it the other day, I got
Wow.
it.
All right, move the question.
All right. Is there any further discussion on the letter? Seeing or hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? That's unanimous.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
Motion's been made and
Second.
seconded to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye, Joe. Hey,
Thank you very
anybody
much.
night, maybe? No.